Hey everyone, John here from Fat Stacks. I am super excited. I've waited quite a while to talk to this guy about his niche business. It's Tony Hill. He is blowing it up on Twitter. I learned about him. He's a Fat Stacks forum member, and he joined some time ago. But he really got my attention with some of the amazing in-depth posts he was writing about, specifically to Pinterest, to SEO, and from my understanding, he's also doing quite well with news app type traffic as well. He's got growing traffic to a large site, knows this business really well, and I'm happy to have him on. Tony, welcome.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Oh, thanks. So let's kick off. How long have you been in the niche site business?
I've been doing this for about 18 years now.
Ah,
Yeah. It started, I probably built my first website when I was a teenager, and probably made my first dollar online when I was a senior in high school in 2003. And I signed up for an AdSense account and set up a little website. I think it was like reviewing web hosts at the time. Put AdSense ads on there and just started clicking on it after school every day. Made $20 a day. I thought it was great, and that lasted about 3 months or so, and I got banned. But yeah, that's when I got started and just fell in love with this idea of being able to create websites and earn revenue through ads.
nice. That wow, that's longer than me. So you've been around back in the old AdSense days. So
That's right.
right now, why don't you, obviously over 18 years, you've probably worked on a bunch of different projects and sites. What's
Yeah.
your focus right now? How many sites are you working on, and what's your focus with that?
I've got one primary site I'm focusing on. There's another one that I give maybe 10% of my attention to. And then I've got a bunch of sites that are collecting dust. They, I got started really full time doing this back in 2005 and had a lot of medical type websites that did great until the Google Medic update and they got slammed. And so there's just no digging back from that at this point, trying to compete with sites like Healthline, WebMD. So pivoted, focused on some other sites, and now primarily focused on one.
Okay, so I take it you've moved away from YMYL health type websites and moved into something totally different.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, just focusing on this one, and these days it's getting about 3.5 million visitors a month, doing over 8 million page views a month.
Wow.
So it's been great. It's been up and down. Doing this long enough. This particular site, I've been running it since the beginning, since 2005. So I've experienced all sorts of Google updates with it. And it's crazy to look at my Google Analytics chart just to see the ups and downs of the traffic. And that just seems to be the nature of the game when you're in it long enough. This site primarily generates its revenue through ads. Dabbled in some affiliate related stuff, some product stuff, but at the end of the day, bread and butter is through ads.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I think a lot of readers are listeners are happy to hear about the ups and downs. My largest site, which is also my focus, launched in 2014. Definitely ups and downs. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. What was your biggest drop since you launched in terms of percentage of traffic, roughly?
Yeah, good question. I believe it was the Penguin update. Uh, yeah, a long time
Okay.
ago. Yeah,
I remember.
Penguin. I participated in link exchanges, directory submissions, easing articles, did all those things. All those links are now in my disavow file. Was able to recover from that, and then had a big drop from a core update of May of last year.
Okay.
And so, I've seen drops anywhere between 10 to 60, 70% probably. And so to see something like that drop overnight is yeah, it sucks. I've been there. It's hard, especially when it's your primary income and you've got a team of people that you're paying for, and so I'm used to it now. At this point, I realize it's just waves, just an entrepreneurial roller coaster. Is the way I look at it, especially if you're going to play in Google Sandbox. So, but this past core update from March. 23 have done really well. Been able to recover from that previous May core update, and then even earn more traffic since that as well. So really pumped about that. Spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money focusing on improving the site, trying to get it to recover. So it's nice to see the fruits of that.
Yeah, well, those are big drops, and I've had similar experiences over the years, and it's never fun. And you just have to adapt and move on. So I
Yeah.
definitely want to talk about in this video what the steps you did because you've written about it to recover from last year's drop. That was significant, and you recovered. So that was great. Before we dive into that, so you
Yeah.
mentioned your revenue sources primarily ads. It's like me, and but how about your traffic sources? We've talked about Google. You have big other traffic sources, and give us percentages roughly.
Yeah. So roughly 60% comes from organic, 20% from Pinterest, and 20% from Google Discover. And that, there might be a really small percentage from Bing, and some miscellaneous like social media and whatnot. But those three are Google, organic, Pinterest, Discover. It's my primary source.
All right, well, it's quite good diversification, and I guess you've learned over the years it's good to do that. So I definitely want
Yeah.
to touch on
Yeah.
Pinterest too because you're killing it with Pinterest. Really impressive.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. And then I'm focusing on Facebook a little bit more, based on what's going on in the FastX forums and some of the strategies people are talking about and implementing and testing there. I know you're working on that as well. So I've got my like campaign set up and working on creating posts every single day, trying to drive traffic back to the site and making a little bit of progress there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I my guess is if you're able to get 20% from Discover, chances are doing half decent on Facebook is pretty high. That's my guess. I mean, it's kind of the same concept in terms of the
Yeah.
engagement type of content.
Yep. For sure. Yeah. That's my goal, to get it up to, that level of what I'm doing with Pinterest or Google Discover. Again, going back to that diversification of traffic sources.
All right, so let's start with the Google improvement that you had from the recent update. You
Mm-hmm.
dramatically recovered a lot of your traffic you lost a year ago. Can you give us a you've actually written a step-by-step process of what you did, and it's impressive, and it was a lot of work, but it paid off. So why don't you step us through that?
Yeah, man. So,
It's
the
detailed.
first, yeah, I don't know how many. There are probably over 30 things that I've laid out that I worked on. The very first things, right? You want to identify what part of your site dropped. For me, it was pretty much every single page dropped in traffic and rankings. So from there, it's just trying to find like the weakest links of the site, looking at which dropped the most, and not surprisingly, it was sections of the site that we've been ignoring. And we had been, prior to that core update, been spending a lot of time focused on publishing new content, less time on keeping up with the existing content. So like when you do this for 18 plus years with one website, um, there's a different strategy you have to take over time on keeping up with that site, keeping up with all of the content that's there, and making those improvements, making them relevant still over the decades, really. And so I didn't have a great strategy in place to do that. I do now, but I didn't then. And so this past year, just going through this process of going through every single article, in which we haven't even gotten to every single article to make improvements, but it's just a normal process. And like when we get through them all, we'll just start all over again. So, we were just taking it like one article at a time. We're going in and we're just looking at uh, how helpful is it? How relevant is it still? What are topics that we're missing? What are, specific keywords that we're missing? But what's been really helpful is going through our Google Search Console reports for an article. So we'll plug in the URL there. We'll look at a lot of the search queries that we're showing up for that Google thinks we're relevant for, but we're missing those particular keywords, so those queries in the actual article. So we might be ranking, say, in the top 10, maybe 5 or 6 for some of these, and we don't have the keywords on the page. But then once we put those keywords on the page, then our relevance and rankings go up from that. Not right away, sometimes right away, sometimes like within a couple of weeks, we'll see traffic started to go up. For other articles, it wasn't until the core update hit that we really started to see traffic go up. So Google Search Console has just been a gold mine for that. And another way to figure out what to prioritize what kind of topics and keywords to put into an existing article, because there can be a huge list that you're given. Like maybe there might be 100 200 lists of words that you're missing, and how do you prioritize that? Like one, you can do it by like what gets the most impressions, or what I did is I looked at, all right, all the competitors that are ranking above me, which of them are including these particular keywords that I'm not, and let's start with those first, and then from there let's add a few more that they're not including, and to help give us that edge. So we did a lot of work going through our content, going through our sentences, making them easy to read, putting them in the Hemingway app. If you just go Google Hemingway app, you'll see a great tool that helps you really simplify and make your content easier to read for most people. We use a Grammarly premium plugin, and so we were working on going through making sure the article was getting a 100% score, which was that's a really detailed process, and it takes a while, because some of our content, man, it ranges from like 2,000 words up to, I've seen like 8,000 plus 10,000 plus words. Just depends on the topic and the competitors. So I mean, man, it takes a while. So I'm glad I have a team around me that's helping me out, because that's tedious work. And we even looked at like analyzing our sentences to look at how are we writing in a way that puts the most important information first and foremost. Like, I don't know if you ever used Google's NLP Demo tool. Have you checked that out before? Okay. So they've got a free demo tool for the NLP API. Definitely check it out. And what it does is, like, so you can copy your content, paste it in there, and it's going to analyze it, and it's going to pull out all the entities or main topics of it. And it's going to give it a salient score, like how important are some of these topics in your content are to the content itself. So you can put your entire article in there. You can put a paragraph or even a sentence in there. So if you take a whole sentence and drop it in there, it will tell you the main subject of the sentence, what it thinks is the most important subject or entity or topic of that sentence. And what we were finding is the way we were writing the main topic of the sentence, what we wanted to be the main topic of the sentence, isn't what Google's NLP was understanding as the main topic of the sentence. And one of the little things that we realized we could do is just put whatever the main topic is, like the most important thing you're talking about in a sentence or in a paragraph, is put that at the beginning of it. And that little tweak changes how Google and other search engines interpret your content and what is important about it. So little things like that we've discovered along the way that, again, we've done so many things. It's hard to say which one in particular, was that silver bullet. I think it was just a combination of all of those things. And so this was just one of those random little things that we found that was helpful. One thing I just discovered yesterday that blew my mind was, I don't know if you ever used the Google Ads keyword tool. Do you use that very much?
Okay. Not recently, but I have, yeah.
I use that all the time. It's one of my primary sources for keywords. And because I think Google's AI does probably the best job at figuring out, what keywords are people are using and which words are relevant. It's great because you can start off with a seed keyword, put it in there, and it's just going to list out a bunch of keywords and sort it by relevance to it. Well, one of the little tools in there that you can do, instead of starting off the keyword, you can start off with a URL. So I took one of my top competitors' URLs for one of their articles, pasted it in there, and then it displays a list of the most relevant keywords Google thinks that are relevant to that particular article in order of relevance. And I noticed, like, all right, those keywords all made sense. Like the number one listed word was like that primary keyword. Number two was like a variation of the primary. Number three was like a secondary keyword. All made sense. And they were ranking number one. I plug in my article URL, and the number one like relevant word it had something to do with the topic, but it was not the primary keyword of the topic. It was like way down, like listed number 15. So that was telling me that the way, at least whatever technology is behind that Google Ads keyword tool, when it's crawling the article and it's trying to figure out the most important topics, um, it's I'm getting it wrong according to that tool. And I put in my number two competitor who was ranking above me. I was ranking number three, and they also had their relevance of their keywords sorted in the right way, where the primary
Okay.
keyword was on top. And so I dug in that. I was like, why is this happening? And I realized like I was using too many secondary terms or related, they were related terms and they were drowning out the primary term, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I need to put more of the primary terms, or aspects or partial primary terms, into like the heading tags, again, putting them like more towards the beginning of sentences and paragraphs, that kind of stuff. So working on tweaking those. And when you've got a site that's really old and you've got some stiff competition, like my competition's been around for 10 plus years, these little details for my niche matter, right? So you can just, there are some niches out there you can just publish an article, throw it into Surfer SEO, make some optimizations, publish it, and you're going to be ranking, maybe top three pretty easily. That's not the case in some niches where it's just really competitive. So it
Yeah.
just takes some
Wow.
of these nuances.
That's some really good information. There's a lot there. I've got a few follow-up questions to that process.
Okay.
So basically, in a way, at the bird's eye view, it's basically making content better for both readers, but also for Google and the way Google operates. So that makes a lot of sense, and I'm totally sold on that concept. So you mentioned you have a team of people helping with this. How many people are on your team? How many?
Yeah, I got 10 people. So I've got a lot of VAs over in the Philippines.
Yeah,
They're just super helpful. I use onlinejobs.ph to find them all. And I found that they're just so loyal. They work hard. And if you just are really clear with your instructions
yeah,
with
totally.
them, you can let them go and they can do it. And so they've been with me for some have been with me for 7 years plus years.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's great. I've got a programmer, and who builds all sorts of custom tools that we use for our workflow for SEO, just tools that just I can't find out there, and so we just build our own. And then I've got an American editor who goes through and makes sure that all of our content um, is easy to read, makes sense. Of course, but way we write our content is a little different than traditional publishers may do, where they hire freelancers or they use AI to do it. Most of our content is written by experts in our particular niche. So
Okay.
these are blue collar experts, and so we've built relationships with probably 50 of them that write for us. And so they know their stuff, but they're not the best writers. So we've got to come behind them and clean up their work. And actually, we've been implemented a tool where we can put in their content, and it will Chat GPT's the API there will just make some improvements to what they wrote.
Yeah.
Um, and then we'll use Grammarly on it and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was a big shift over the last couple of years, is going back to let's get our experts to write it. I've tried freelancers, even tried people from the Philippines, but at the end of the day, they're just going to be things that experts are going to think about and mention that a freelance writer will not. If you're trying to dive deep and you're in a really competitive niche, then I think that's the way to go. At least that's the way I'm going.
Mark, it's great. So how many? Let's you don't have to say the exact number, but what percentage of your content have you updated since last year's drop that resulted in, I guess, the entire site's like improved? Did you update
Yeah.
every single article, or is it 50%? Or
Yeah, like about 50%.
okay.
Yep. So we've got a ways to go. So we saw an overall improvement. And I think every single article improved in rankings and traffic, even though we hadn't touched them,
Yeah, that's interesting.
which is super interesting. Now, we have done some things site wide that I think sent some good site wide signals. Like, one, that, we're making improvements to the site in general, that at least we're starting to give attention to other areas, and we're making those improvements. We updated that last updated date, so Google's aware of all those changes. We started an ask the expert section of the site, where we've been working on publishing, just really common questions people have, and then we have one of our experts go in and write a response there. And so we're starting to fill out that section of the site. I improved the navigation and the amount of categories that we have. So we have like 10 primary categories, and probably expanded to like 50 plus categories, and create a lot of subcategories and put it all in the navigation. It's a huge mega menu, and I let Google index almost all of these categories. And some of these categories, like especially the sub ones, they're competing with an article.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so, but Google's smart enough to know which one it should rank,
Mhm.
because the formats are just different. And so it knows what Google or what users are likely wanting to see. But the idea is that it's just sending signals to Google of like how our content is structured, um, and it's increasing, that topical relevance. And so that was another big site-wide thing, a signal that we put in there that might have helped. We've improved the page speed significantly, and so the site's way faster. Switching over to Cloudflare pretty much almost instantly, increased our page speed. So I think that's a huge factor. And then another one for sure is we started doing some Haro responses, and I,
Okay.
I think we got like 5 to 10 links, and they're okay. Um, so not a ton, and it must be in a niche that just doesn't. There's just not a lot of opportunities on Haro. That well kind of ran dry pretty quick with that. So we just kept seeing the same publications,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
over and over again, and we've already answered their questions, and we realized there were some that they're just never going to include us, because we respond every single time, and for months and months, and they never include us. And there are others that will always include us. But it's like, all right, we already got a link from your site. We really don't need another one. So we stopped doing that after 5 to 10 links or so. So I'm sure that was a factor as well. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, you threw everything at the kitchen sink at it, and
that's right.
you never really know what works, but I mean, at least you found a system that's working, and like you say, you're halfway there. But I think it's really interesting you did this for half the site, but the whole site improved so much. That's actually great news, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it goes to show. I mean, sometimes maybe Google got it wrong last year. I mean, I can see how in some ways that for some articles, yeah, we deserve to have our ranking drop. But for others, it didn't make any sense for me. And of course, I can't look at my site objectively, right?
Right.
So, but I know I admit that there were sites that are articles that just weren't that great. And so we just had to raise our standard a little higher and raise it above our competitors. And so sometimes that's the frustrating part, is like, I know we have higher standards than our all of our competitors, and we're making progress on reaching those standards. And still, we're not seeing, with some articles, we're not seeing us make that jump up to that number one spot, um, for one reason or another. So uh, we'll just continue to do it until Google finally gets it right. Like, my goal is to be able to do two things: show my entire site to my mom and be proud of it, and show my site to any Google engineer and show them like, hey, this article is not ranking number one, and for them to be really embarrassed that it's not ranking number one.
Yeah. Great goal. I love that. That's great. Yeah. I'm in the same boat. It's an old site, and my standards have changed over the years, right? The quality level, and there's old stuff that it's just not up to par. And I'm not updating to the level you are, but I probably should take a page out of your playbook here and start doing more. I have done some, and I'm doing a
Yeah.
whole section. Uh, I'm trying to narrow focus a little bit with the direction I'm going, so I'm focusing on that. But I
Mm-hmm.
am heartened by you did 50% of your site, which I haven't done, and you've experienced such a great
Yeah.
lift in traffic. So that's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, we've got about 1,200 or so articles, so that was about 600 that we worked on. I'm not sure how big, like your main site. How many articles are you at? Do you know?
Well, my site's a little bit weird because I syndicate a ton of content, and I know index it.
Okay.
Okay, in terms of
Oh, okay.
index long form, and I have alternative uses for that, like other traffic sources and everything. Like there's reasons I do that. It's not just like because I like
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
But I would say like in terms of long form index, yeah, probably at least 4,000, maybe
Oh
more.
man.
And certainly there are articles there that either should just be deleted or dramatically improved, no question. So
Yeah,
uh,
that'd be a lot to get through.
yeah, and probably a calling for me would be a smart move. Now I've actually had a nice rebound in the last year as well. Not a full recovery,
Hmm.
but a decent one from the drop in last September. That I think it was a helpful content update.
Nice.
Knocked me down a bit. So I have recovered that. My big effort was the whole knowledge graph and eat and working on that. I've sort of maxed that out. I've done as much as I think I can do, as any site can do. Next step
Hmm.
would be to do what you've done, and it's like real, like for me, a calling of content, and then going through and getting really technical with the writing and letting Google know what the intent of every single article is, plus
Yeah.
writing really good stuff for
Yeah.
users. So really
Yeah.
great steps, great tips. I appreciate it.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, because it gets hard over time because the longer you have your site, the more time that there is for new competition to come in. And
Yeah,
so now, like you may have an article on your site that is 3, 4, 5 years old, and at the time it was maybe the best one out there. But now you've got a new competitor who's coming in, and they're using the latest AI tools to write really comprehensive articles that are going to outrank you
yeah,
sooner, than later. And so then at some point you got to go back and you've got to up your game. And I like to keep a close eye on up and coming competition. I learn a lot from them. They A lot of times they'll start off with hitting some really long tail keywords, and maybe they were keywords that I had looked at years ago and there just wasn't a lot of traffic, and so I didn't focus on them. But things have changed since then. User behavior changed, search behavior changed, and now these are more popular keywords, and I've ignored them, but new competitors are targeting them. So I like to take some of my primary keywords. I'll put them into Google, and I'll set like you can set a time range of just show me results like in the last 24 hours or the last week. So I'll do like the last year or the last month, and I'll just start scrolling through those Google search results to look for any potential competitors I've never seen before. And then I'll go and check out their website and look at some of the topics they're covering. And I found some new ones. I've seen some old ones. I'm like, okay, well, let me plug that into like SEMrush or something and see what the traffic is like. And yeah, seeing that it's picked up and search traffic. And so then I'll go in and I'll create an article on that topic. But that's just something that again you got to put in your system of just being able to maintain and grow a site over time, over that long term.
yeah,
Things are exciting. Things are fun and exciting in those first few years of launching a new site. Um,
yeah,
and just being able to just throw up any article, doing keyword research, finding all these new topics to cover. But then over time, and that well will kind of run dry, and you'll have to go back and you'll start doing the really long tail keywords. But then you can't forget about the original ones that you wrote and updating them. And yeah, it's a different mentality in game when you've got a site that's like 10 plus years old that I found.
yeah, for sure. It's like painting the bridge. You finish it, you got to start over. You just got to stay on top of it. But
Yeah.
the number I'm impressed is 3.5 million monthly visitors with 1,200 articles. That's really really impressive. That's a high average number of visitors per article per month. So kudos.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Thanks.
that's probably way above average, I would say, for a lot of niche sites.
Yeah, I
So
would say so. So, there are lots of niches out there where there's a lot of search volume, but of course, those are going to be really competitive.
yeah,
It
You got to
helps
bring
when you
the
start your site in 2005. Yeah, yeah,
to
for
every
sure.
article. Well, I want to transition now because you aren't just going after Google traffic. You actually do really well with Pinterest, like crazy numbers that you've posted in the forum. You said it's 20% of your traffic, which of 3.5 million monthlies is a lot. So Pinterest is something I think can be used in a lot of niches, not all niches, but a good number of them.
Mhm.
So you've definitely refined the process and you've written about it in the FatStax forum in detail. And I know a lot of members love that thread. It's super helpful. Uh, explain what you do there. How are you making Pinterest work so well? And it seems to be relatively recent that you've really been knocking it out of the park with Pinterest.
Yeah, just in the last couple of years. At the end of the day, you've got to be in a niche that just does well with Pinterest.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'm fortunately am in one of those niches, right? So you're looking at, uh, you know, Pinterest is going to be primarily women. Um, so you're looking at fashion, beauty. Um, then you've got like home decor, that kind of stuff, recipes. Those are some of the biggest niches there, and so it gets lots of search volume there. Naturally, lots of pins with it, so that helps me first and foremost of being in one of those niches. And so people just need to know that going in. I did the long Pinterest thread and Twitter recently, and I had a lot of DMs from that one in particular
I bet.
of compared to anything else I've done with some of my Twitter threads. And so there were a lot of people that were wanting me to take a look at their Pinterest account to see, what they're doing wrong because they've been struggling. And, that's the first thing I'm seeing. Like, yeah, this is definitely not a top tier niche for Pinterest, but you could make it work. You just have to maybe approach it differently. There are some niches in there like they can just throw up any image on Pinterest and they'll get traffic from it. For others, they've got to do a little bit more work on how they're going to reach that particular audience. That maybe someone's really into fashion, but you've got a website that's about animals. How are you going to? That person who's into fashion may also have a pet at home, and so there is an angle to figure out how can you reach that audience. Pets might not be the biggest category in Pinterest, but you can reach those people. You just can't do it the same way as like being in the recipe niche where you can just throw a great picture of whatever it is that you just baked or cooked, and you can get traffic from it. Yeah. So but really for me, what I think the instant thing that started to drive more traffic was just pinning more. I mean, we're
Okay.
doing 30, 40 images a day that we're penning 7 days a week. It's a lot, and they're
It is.
all they're all original for the most part. I mean that was another key thing. It's like we've got to be the first one to pen these images. So okay, I'm fortunate to be in a niche where uh, a lot of these images are starting off on social media before they do with Pinterest. And so if we
Okay.
can be the first ones to pen them to Pinterest, that's going to go a long way. So we give credit to the original person who posted the photo and or the graphic or whatever it is, and then we always link every single pin to an article, to a relevant article on the site and all that. But yeah, so that's another thing is just there's some stars aligned for me, but there are a lot of other niches out there you can be in that you can do really well with. But I think first and foremost, you just got to pin more and pin original content.
One really interesting tactic you use is for some articles you will create a full separate board and just for that article. And then you pin a whole handful of different pins
Yeah.
and they all link to that one article. And that's it. You don't add more to that board. It's a really interesting strategy. I've never done it. So and then that's working for you.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know where we I think we just started doing that strategy because it just helped us stay organized because we're depending so much. And like, how do we organize all this? And it just made sense to just go, let's create a whole board for every article. And that's one of the things that when I've been checking out some other Pinterest pages and some, like, I don't see any boards at all. And so that would be my first recommendation. It works for us. Again, kind of going back to like all the categories we had created on our site. It's great for not only for search engines, but also for users to navigate and find what they want. So I'm sure it's great for maybe Pinterest algorithm to like see and connect, these images with particular board, and connecting those topics together. And it just makes it easier for users too to make those connections.
So do you optimize the board title for like a long tail keyword, or do you keep it just very general? You're not trying to rank the board page itself. You're ranking
Mm-hmm.
individual pins to drive the traffic to your site. What's your tactic there?
Yeah, the board names are pretty simple. Like whatever the primary keyword is for the article, that's what we'll use for the board. And I don't even know if we do a board description. I'll have to go back through and see if there's even an option. I don't know. All I know is we've got all these. Okay, okay, yeah. So we don't really focus too much on optimization of boards, other than just setting them up as the main keyword for that article, and then basically, every pin is going to be some, for the most part, a variation of that main keyword. It could be like a subtopic in that article, say like one of your headings could be the pen title for it, and sometimes it's just simply we'll take that headline or that article title and just use AI to rewrite a new one and plug that in. We also put text, we overlay text on the images. I've seen those do really well. So yeah, either we'll take like say maybe the subheading that particular image will be under on the article, and we'll just use that as a text, not only on the image but also as a pen title. Or sometimes we'll take the headline and put that on the pen as well. So each one is just a little bit different because then we just use AI to rewrite these titles for us, just to make each one unique.
Yeah.
But yeah. So we saw a nice boost with doing that. The descriptions. One of the things that I did recently is I went back through with and went through Pinterest. Pinterest like has just a page that's set up with tips and guidelines on like best practices, and they have some good information in there. And it
Okay.
had been a while since I looked at it. I got set up with Pinterest account manager when I started running ads. If you spend enough every day, then they'll assign you account manager. And so I've had several conversations with them that were pretty insightful. Um, and I was able to, because their background was mainly the ads side of Pinterest, but they're talking with other publishers, and they know that organic is a big part of it as well. And so it's been good to do that. So I highly recommend people do that. I mean, at the time, I think it was like $10 a day you had to
Okay.
spend.
Yeah.
And then they would assign you an account manager. So I don't know if that's still true right now, but yeah. So, and just start asking them questions. And, like one of the things that I learned is that for them, follower count isn't as a big a deal, that they're really looking for, initial engagement. And uh, if a pen takes off, then they'll start to show it to more and more people, and doesn't really mean you need to have a lot of followers. The way the algorithm looks at it. So I don't really do any pin campaigns to increase the follower count or worry too much about it. Now, granted, I've got over 500,000 followers on for that Pinterest account, so I'm
Wow.
sure that helps,
Yeah.
right? But
But
it's that account's been around since like 2000, I don't know, 10 or earlier.
wow, you're like launched with Pinterest.
Yeah,
The first
we
2 years.
jumped on it. Yeah, I guess we jumped on it pretty quick.
No kidding.
Yeah, so we did well. So it was easier to do Pinterest and get some traffic back in the day, and then over
Yeah.
time, the competition just got stiffer, and so we just focused more on SEO and getting the search traffic there. But yeah, once we shifted back to all right, let's start pinning way more.
Uh-huh.
Um, it made a huge difference. So same thing with Facebook, right? Like we had been maybe posting once or twice on Facebook up until like the last couple of months, and now we're doing anywhere between 8 to 12 posts a day, and that
Yeah.
made an instant huge shift in our traffic, going from maybe like 25 people a day from Facebook to now getting over like 1,000, sometimes 2,000 people a day,
Yeah.
just from instantly posting more, right? And
Yeah.
so something I think people think is going to happen is that they're going to overwhelm their audience, like or they're not, um, they don't want to post the same thing more than once.
Yeah.
Again, they don't want to overwhelm the audience. They don't want to bore them with like the same posts every single time. But the reality is, they're likely not seeing most of your posts,
For sure.
And so it's okay. Like if you're going to post 10 times on Facebook in one day, someone might see one or two of those,
Yeah.
maybe. And same thing if you repost something more than a couple times, like in a given month, then yeah, the chances of someone seeing both of those is pretty slim. So uh,
Oh, for
that
sure.
that was kind of a big shift that I had made.
Right. In your
Has
mindset,
helped.
and that it's like, oh, okay,
Yep.
I could
Yep.
make this work with, I have 1,200 published articles, maybe a few hundred are good for Facebook, but I can actually make the strategy work if I'm willing to repost every month
Yep.
or
Yep. And right now, I know I know Facebook wasn't on our list of things to talk about, but one of the things this past week that I've has been a big for us to send a lot of traffic is Facebook stories.
ah,
So, yeah, I've
we
been
need to try that.
shocked.
Do you ever work?
Yeah, it's working for me. So say a pen or not, a Facebook post might get 25, 50, maybe 100 clicks. Some of them every once in a while we'll hit and we'll get like 400 or 500 clicks, but yeah, a story, um, we can consistently get a couple hundred clicks for sure with it. The downside is like then if you replace, basically you can only have one story at a time is what I figured
Okay.
out, and so
Okay.
then you got to let that ride.
Yeah.
And so I'm just currently testing to see like is it helpful just to let it go for a whole 24 hours, or maybe let's do 3 stories a day, and so it's only going to have maybe 4 or 5 hours that it will run and get traffic from. But I was quite shocked at that, because all you have to do is when you do a story, we do a text overlay, and it basically just say swipe up to see more, or swipe up to learn more, whatever that action you want them to take on your site. And so we would just put that at the bottom, and so all they have to do is swipe up, and it instantly loads up your site, and they start engaging. It's been great. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was
It's like,
something I haven't seen in the forums.
no,
People were trying or not, but for me, it's working.
I've been meaning to do that, and I've dabbled a little bit with Instagram stories, not enough to see if that's going to work. What I like about Instagram stories, you can put links on them, right? Like you can actually
Oh
click
yeah.
them
Okay.
up, you can add to
Yep.
it. It's one of these cool ways you can actually drive traffic from Instagram. So
Right.
it's
Right.
on my list, but so were the Facebook stories. It's great
Okay.
you mentioned that. That's cool. They work, but one at a time isn't interesting. Like you say, should you? Is a peak at 4 hours? Is a peak at 12 hours?
Hmm.
When is the ideal time to sort of? And I guess you have to send them out on the Facebook platform, right? Like you can't use a social media scheduling tool or anything that you know
That's
of.
right.
I haven't seen it in Buffer for Facebook.
No, no. And I even had a hard time their desktop experience for doing it. It was either I couldn't add a link or I couldn't add the text. And so right now I'm doing it myself, just because whenever
Yeah,
I start a new project, I like to get my hands dirty, roll my sleeves, and figure it out.
yeah,
It's one of the areas I love doing. I think I'm good at. And so right now, like that's my primary project, is figuring out Facebook traffic. And so I have to use the app for the stories. It's kind of a pain doing it on my phone, but
totally.
that's what's working. Yeah, I need to try Instagram though. I totally forgot. I mean, stories came from
Yeah,
Instagram. I don't know. Is that where it originated from? And so we got an Instagram account. I haven't really messed with stories there. I didn't realize you could also swipe up on that, and they could go right to your site.
yeah. It's like because I think Instagram's got huge potential. The trick is getting people from Instagram to the website, and so Stories is like one of the only ways where you can actually get the click from it. So I think there's good potential there. And
Yeah.
I got to try the Facebook stories. I've had great results with Facebook regular posts, so I haven't been that motivated to try it. But you have inspired me. I'm gonna jump on that
Yeah.
after
Do
this and
it.
throw some out. So that's amazing. Last I want to touch on is 20% traffic from Discover. Discover has eluded me to date, despite some efforts. It's frustrating, but you're getting 20%, which
Mm-hmm.
is a lot. So, a lot of people I read out there on Discover, it's sort of like there's no magic formula. There's no set way to be like do
Mm-hmm.
XYZ and bang,
Mm-hmm.
Discover traffic. It's just one of these things that kind of happens, and some people seem to be able to like knock it out of the park consistently, not every day,
Yep.
but consistently, and other people just
Yep.
get nothing. I'm in the nothing camp, so I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, it really is a black box to a degree, you know. Um, but there are patterns that I've noticed. And so, there's a lot of things that I've figured out that, and I'll share that, it just may be correlation and not causation.
Hmm.
But I think what's been helpful is looking at the data and looking at what's working and doing more of that. But you have to set aside the time to actually dig through the data and then use your brain. Well, now you can use more AI to help you come up
Yeah,
with some strategies and come up with a plan, right? And so for some people, in some niches, it might just have to be a complete shift in how they write their content and the angle that they're taking and the type of content that they're publishing. Whatever they're doing, if you're not really getting a whole lot of Discover traffic right now, it's either because your site probably just doesn't meet their quality threshold, and they're looking at EEAT,
yeah,
however they measure those signals, and looking for overall site quality. And so if it's not that, then it's just the type of content you're posting isn't resonating with what they want to show people.
right.
People. So my theory is that people want to be informed and entertained or inspired. They want novelty. They want to uh, they want to chase down some curiosity. If you make them curious, um, people like that.
Yeah,
If you create some sort of information gap, like you kind of present something to them and like, oh, I like what is that? How does that work? Or what is the answer? It creates that information gap and sparks that curiosity, and that can be helpful too. Um, and it has to be in a niche or on a topic that people want to engage with often, right? So, I mean, some people may be really passionate and really enjoy doing their taxes every year, but that's just a one-time thing, right? And so, if that's your niche is taxes, yeah, people aren't really going to engage with that throughout the year,
right,
right?
right.
So you gotta be in something where people are going to engage with. I would say at least a few times a month in their life, right? So that someone, if it's a hobby, like that's a great aspect. Um, or of course, there's people like gossip, they like celebrity news, they like news in general, um, especially if it relates to anything that they're interested in, right? So those are some things to think about as you're trying to formulate a plan on targeting discover topics. The clickbait type headlines work. I mean, I know Google has guidelines for discover that says like don't do clickbait type um, headlines, but I think if you fulfill on the promise and you don't mislead people, they work. Um, so
Yeah,
I
right.
think that's what I think really Google's trying to crack down on is just don't mislead people. And really, if Google's measuring if how long they're on your site, they click on it, and if they're on there just for a couple seconds and they bounce back, then Google knows that you're probably doing some clickbait
Yeah,
type stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Um, but it really comes down to your headline and your image, your featured image.
yeah.
You want to be able to have people stop scrolling because you caught their attention with either the headline or the image or a combination of the two. And so that's a big part of that I found of just being successful in there.
Are you creating content specifically for Discover and not search, or is it one and the same and you happen to make it work for both?
Yeah, it's one of the same. So a lot of my content is listicle type
Yeah,
content.
yeah,
And so that does listicle stuff does really well in Discover, and news, and stories do really well. We don't do a lot of stories, but we do a lot of listicles. So you can take some different approaches. There's a really good interview on the Niche Pursuits podcast with a guy that owns
yeah.
InsideTheMagic.net, I believe. Did you watch that one?
I read the transcript, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he had
I read
some
the
great
transcript.
insights
Yeah,
on how they do Google Discover, and they take more of the story approach
yeah,
with things. And I have the listicle approach. That's just what we do, and so that works well for search and for Discover. Um, but I think what I found though is one of the things that we've been doing and evolving over time. Like again, when you have a site that's really old, you're trying to stay fresh. You're trying to find new topics, and so one of the things that we've been doing is we've been finding more unique angles on how we can target different types of people with
okay,
our content, right?
yeah,
So think about like demographics, like someone's age or their location or their lifestyle or their stage of life or hobbies, or maybe they have a disability, right? And so it's not the simple like the best X for Y.
right,
Those kind of things, they work well, but it can also be like the best X if you, or the best X for Y when, and to take that to a different level, because that all best X for Y type content is so saturated, right?
totally.
And so, yeah, I mean, I've actually just recently went through ChatGPT and was like, all right, let's go through and come up with a bunch of different types of people or characteristics of people, um, that you could angle your content towards, right? So you can angle it towards like young families or college students or empty nesters or introverts or extroverts, um, people who have pets, people who they travel a lot, people who have different food preferences, like maybe they're vegan or they're lactose
Yeah,
intolerant or their nature levels, right? So there's all sorts of those different angles that you can take with your content that maybe you haven't tried before. If you've got a website about, say, like card games, and you just have a bunch of listicles, like the 10 best card games, um, for groups, or the 10 best card games for couples. Well, you can take that a next step of like, the 10 fast and easiest card games for busy families, um,
right,
to
yeah,
really kind of catch someone and be able to identify someone like, oh yeah, like we're super busy. I like playing card games, but we never have time, right? So something like that will really catch their attention. Um, Another one that can do well is like the decade people were born in type of posts, right?
oh,
So like
I love it.
the 10 most popular house styles from the 1980s. Can you recognize yours? Like
Yeah,
stuff like that will catch people's attention.
for sure.
Um, Yep.
The nostalgia.
So just that's what I encourage people to do. Like go scroll through some of your article topics, and think about how you could rewrite these, um, targeting different demographics, different characteristics, different types of people from different walks of life. And you can use ChatGPT to help you out with that too. So
For sure. Those are great tips. Actually, I'm big on listicles too. I'm not really into the new stories type thing. So
mhm.
I love the whole thing I read about Inside the Magic .net at Niche Pursuits. I thought it was outstanding. It kind of blew my mind in terms of volume, but I couldn't really figure out how to do the news stories things. I get how it works for their
Mhm.
site. It's ideally suited.
Mhm.
So here you're talking about
Yeah.
listicles, which is my wheelhouse,
Yeah.
and so you're great ideas, great ways to think about a different tweet to a target audience for
Yeah.
specific articles that might
Yeah.
resonate with people. So that's great.
Cool.
Um,
Yeah. And the other thing that I've found is, linking topics together. So one of the things that I noticed is that, sometimes if an article does really well on Google Discover, there will be a very similar one that maybe the next week after that it will do really well in Google Discover. So, there are lots of plugins out there for WordPress where when you get to the bottom of an article, I'll automatically load another one. And ideally, the next one that it loads will be one that fits with the previous one that they had just read. Like it's
Yeah.
very related. It could be like a natural next step for them of what they would need to read. And a lot of times I found that those articles are the ones that will do well with this kind of ride that wave of like, all right, this person, was on Discover, they found this and they were interested in this, and this is closely related, so they might be interested in that. Like Google's figured that out. And so that's what I found. And so it helps when either you have like the automatic loading of an article, or like you have your internal links set up really well, that you're connecting those topics together, right? So if you have, say, an article that's about like the 10 best farmhouse style house plans in 2023 that someone had read because it popped on Google Discover, then maybe you might have an article or write an article on like the 10 best like interior design ideas for a farmhouse style plan, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just a natural flow to that. And so making sure those two pieces of content are connected, and again, either through that like auto loading of the next article or at least through internal links. So that's another pattern I've noticed. And so looking at like what does well in Google Discover, if you're lucky and you get in there and you start getting at least some traffic, just paying close attention to the reporting and Google Discover of what's doing well, what's getting a high click-through rate, and doing more of that, right? Just doing more of what's working is a big strategy. It just takes intentionality of like actually looking at the numbers and seeing what it is working.
Yeah, well, yeah. I get a little bit of traffic from it. It's kind of weird because it's like reviews of these actual brick and mortar stores, which I had a later go out and travel around and do all that. So they're really good, but
Yeah.
I'm amazed that like they actually, in terms of all the stuff I have, that is the biggest Discover success. And it's not much. It's not like this is like
Interesting.
So I definitely like what you have to say about that. I'm going to look at ways to tweak the angles, because sometimes my brain is sort of like a blunt hammer. I go for the obvious, right? Rather than think about it from a nuanced perspective and be like, oh, there's this segment of people that could be really interested. It's essentially the same content a lot of times, or very similar, especially if it's a listicle, right? It's just the way it's presented. And it's just a way of thinking about it in the next level and presenting that. And that's I definitely do more of that. So it's really good suggestion.
And sometimes if it doesn't work the first time, try again.
Yeah.
I found some success where we published a new article and it didn't do well with Discover. If it's going to do well, it's going to be within the first couple weeks.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've seen it within the first day of publishing. But if it doesn't do well, then what I've done is I will redo the URL of it. I will redo the headline. I will redo the featured image for it, and then republish it. Reset the publish date, and redirect the old URL to the new one. Make sure to update internal links, and then I've seen that pop up because I just had a better headline and featured image the next time around.
Is the new URL important? Could you just change the date, the publish date?
Good question. I've seen it work where all we've done, like this was an evergreen article that's been around for years, and all we've done is we made some updates. Like we might have added a paragraph of text and an image, and we updated the last updated date, and then within like a couple days, it popped up in Discover.
Wow!
So I've seen that for sure. And so sometimes, you just make the right tweaks. And we might have made a change to the title tag because, again, we have a lot of listicles and we have a number in the title tag. And so we updated that number because we like to just, add to our existing articles. Yeah. And so maybe it was that combination of updating the title, the last updated date, the text, the image, and of course, having images is super important to doing well and Discover, right? There's a list of like the basic guidelines. You can go Google like best practices for Google Discover, and you'll find some really basic guidelines to follow. But one thing I haven't seen out there that I stumbled upon, I was reading through Google's documentation, which I like to do every quarter or so because they update it and they seem to be giving more and more information to website owners about how they work, best practices. And one of the things that I noticed that they added in there is if you're using schema, which if you want to do well in Discover, you got to be using article or news schema. It recommends for you to, especially as it relates to Google News and Google Discover. I think Google News and Discover are closely related. So if you're optimizing for news, you can do well with Discover. But what they recommend you do is provide 3 different featured images and put that in your schema with different aspect ratios. And they have a minimum of how big your images should be for each aspect ratio. So they list out all the aspect ratios and they list out the minimum size that it needs to be. And so that's something that we had to do. I just had a custom plugin built, but basically, the person responsible for all my featured images, they create 3 versions of them and upload them to the article. So that way you're making it easy for Google to take your featured image and present that aspect ratio based upon whatever device that person is on. It's going to be the best aspect ratio. The less you can make Google have to work hard to understand your site and display it to people, the better you'll probably perform in Google Discover or search and whatnot. So we even put like entities in our schema to help Google make those connections, not only for SEO, but also for Discover.
Yeah.
So yeah, going full board with schema was another one of the big things that I did that could have helped with getting that recovery from the core update, but also could help with Google Discover. I mean, the amount of stuff we have in our schema is crazy. Like you put our URL in and what it spits out on like a schema validator compared to any other competitor or the average site. It's just a huge list of things that we're including. If there's a way if there's a schema for it, like we're going to add it in there.
Do you assign multiple schemas to articles if they fit? Like, will you make it an article as well as news, and then maybe something else, or do you
Interesting.
just pick one and use that?
Yeah. Yeah. I just use the article schema.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I agree with the entities. I've been working with entities too. Yeah, this
Cool.
is the sort of technical stuff. It's really smart. You suggest to go read the Google documentation. I've read it multiple times for Discover.
Mm-hmm.
I should go back. The whole multiple image thing is interesting. Schema is something that's hard to wrap your head around. I hired some people to help with that. And it seems like you're a little more technical savvy than I am, so you've been able to handle it yourself. So good for you.
Yeah, it's nice between ChatGPT and having a programmer on staff, but
Yeah,
you can almost do anything.
yeah, right
It-
on.
it- yeah.
Wow, Tony, thanks a lot. There's a lot of great stuff there, stuff that I've never even read or heard about. And that's what impressed me with you on Twitter. And speaking of Twitter, it's Tony T Hill, double L at the end. Seriously, go follow him because he publishes the best threads. Stuff like the stuff you're not going to read from anybody else because you're actually in there and you're testing and you're figuring it out.
Mhm.
You've got your own programmer on board and you're coming up with some really novel, useful stuff. So thanks so much for hopping on today. It's been great.
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure, John.